Welcome back to the Cosmic Tusk podcast. I'm your host, George Howard, and today we're joined by my friend and two-time Cosmic Summit speaker, Mr. Bob Greenyer of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. We will explain who Mr. Fleischmann is shortly. Bob is an emphatically open source researcher who for decades has shared everything he discovers in the extraordinary world of human-induced cold fusion, its natural production as ball lightning, and evidence that ancient people knew of or transmitted information regarding these unacknowledged arts, but are today secretly available. He can see it in their art, their architecture, their myth, and a number of other domains of the past. You will come to see this in this podcast that Bob is the rare communicator that's fluent in the deep past, modern science history, current experimentation, and stuff we don't even know about yet. So he lives in the past, the present, and the future. Since 2012, he's been advancing research into what's called low energy nuclear reactions, and he'll give us a good definition of that. But what makes MFMP extraordinary is that he's committed to sharing it with everybody. And that's part of the reason he goes on podcasts and runs a fantastic YouTube channel that I've watched for years before the Cosmic Summit. In fact, I think I watched it more before the Cosmic Summit because now, I don't know, there's so many things you got to watch. But Bob is a wonderful friend. I have traveled to India with him and his family, his wonderful wife and children who are incredibly intelligent, and also to Switzerland. So I consider him a close friend. I look forward to him coming to Cosmic Summit 2026 again. And as people who are listening to the podcast know, I always say, don't worry, we're going to have a Cosmic Summit 2026, or maybe 7. We're going to have another one. It ain't going to be 7. But I just got to get the sponsors first. And we had a lot of progress on that today, which I'm going to do a live stream on tomorrow. Welcome, Bob. Sorry for the long introduction, but I hope it intrigued people to the wealth of knowledge that you will bring to them in this recording. How are you?
I'm very good, George. Thank you. And it's good to hear that you are making progress in the Cosmic Summit 2026.
Yeah, and I'm going to do some more communicating about it because it's all good news. The bad news is that I'm just not going to schedule another one until I fix this sponsorship piece, because everything from a bake sale to a golf tournament has sponsors. It's actually, you can't run the financial model without it. But the funny thing is, if you don't have a sponsor, it's the only damn thing the audience doesn't care about.
Yeah, right.
So they just don't care. So I knew if I didn't do it and it kept falling through the cracks, and if I didn't do it, nobody give a damn except me. And I give a damn this year. I have got to make it happen, man. So we're going to do it again. Question is when, and I think we'll let everybody know right about the beginning of the year, probably that first week or two of January. We'll have some.
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand how much it costs to run a conference. I know the ICCF conferences have been struggling in recent years. And the other condensed matter science conference in Europe, that also has difficulties. So it's the financing, because those hotel rooms, those transportation, the venue hire, everything is not getting cheaper each year.
No, it's not getting cheaper, and there's no peeling it back at the last moment and all that kind of stuff. You commit to a lot of costs that are going to happen whether some number of people come or not.
Yeah,
but our future is not so much in attendance, although we'd love to see it grow. It's in our blessing, which is the growth of the social media. And you have been a big contributor to that. You've had some very successful videos. We put out 3 a day at Cosmic Summit on all platforms. And we just crossed 750,000 cumulative followers.
Wow, that's awesome. Well done. I mean, just organizing anything of that kind of magnitude, full respect first. And second, it's building a community of partially, I would say, like-minded in the sense that they're open-minded people, but also from disparate disciplines and research backgrounds. And it's really a unique conference in that regard. You've made it, so full respect.
Well, thank you. No, you've been quite the contributor, and you span our interest in kind of unacknowledged history and things that could be coming. Everybody's got a sense that there's maybe something different coming than the 20th century.
You know what? I've always been interested in the past. I've always been interested in the oldest person I could find in the room, because they're always the most honest often, and the most interesting. And they're often the most ignored. unless they're a celebrity,
Yeah.
which is just irritating for them. They still don't want to speak to anyone in that case.
You know, you're going to make a very interesting old man. I just want that. You're going to be the most interesting old man.
For my grandkids.
Yeah. Go ahead. What else were you thinking?
Yeah. So I mean, my coming into this was really I wanted more kids. Actually, it was about children, and I had bought into this sort of global warming narrative that was basically invented before I was born in 1971. I think in Tanzania. And whatever it was called back then, climate change, global warming, global boiling, or whatever, global freezing it is now again. It's back to global freezing this week. But I bought into it. You know, I didn't have any proper furniture in my bedroom. I had recycled stuff. I made a solar panel and had it was just a one panel because they were very expensive way back when in the late 70s and the early 1980s. And I had a thing that would multiply that by having mirror tiles, and that ran my fan and my light in my room. And, you know, I had one of the first smart cars, those two little seater things imported as the wrong hand drive into the UK. Because I didn't have a car. I just cycled from university for the best part of a decade and hired cars when I needed them for business meetings. I was that into saving the planet, and I bought into all of that. And then this research, which I stumbled upon because I wanted more children and I wanted to find a solution to the energy problem, and I was basically going, I can't self-limit myself until I can't have a child anymore. So I'm going to have to do something active about this. And I've always been interested in energy and science. And so I took myself to South Korea in ICCF 17 in 2012. And I met four other guys. And I said, look, I want to do some replication because all these people, they're dying. Or if they find something, someone comes in and gets them to spin a plate until they die, or tells them they can't tell anything that's of any use to anyone. So we need to replicate this. And we need to do it openly, break the mold of doing it behind closed doors. And these people, they were up for it. We managed to find Francesco Celani of the Italian National Frascati Institute, one of the nuclear authorities in Italy, to give us his active material and the schematics for his device. And to cut a long story short, we replicated it, and on our second attempt, when we actually did what he did, not tried to do what he was going to do. And that led to European funding ultimately, and to American ARPA-E funding for this field. And so it was a very worthwhile exercise, and large numbers of people around the world have been able to seek funding for doing research in this field because essentially we were working in an open way, and people could see that the process or something was there. And that was what me, when I went to that conference, I could see that all these people were seeing, whether in a solid system, a liquid, plasma or gas system, they were seeing the same kind of synthesized elements out. Of course, they had 70 different theories, and at least 69 of them must be wrong because, but they had little parts of the puzzle. And so, and after doing that first replication, I actually felt confident enough to go ahead and have another child, because not only had I seen multiple people seeing the same kind of things, I realized there was a way forward for humanity. And we do have this long buffer with hydrocarbons, and there is no normal nuclear fission, and there were obviously the renewables available at the time. So we're going to be able to bridge this gap until we can use this or normal fusion technology to provide the energy source for humanity. So it's been a very cathartic and enabling exercise to find a way forward, at least so that I'm convinced. And then the job became, when we've replicated it, how can we explain it? That became a lot harder. And once we felt there was a good replication and an explanation for the process, it then came about that we could do the third goal of the project, which was to try and help potential implementations of this technology wherever they might be, whether it's in material processing, pollution reduction, energy production, elemental production, radiation remediation, all these kind of potential avenues, propulsion. So many things came out of this. And then along the the journey, I met a guy in Italy called Francesco Piantelli, and he was a biologist. He was a professor at Siena University, and he was doing an experiment on a little mouse cell, and he was keeping it alive by having it on a piece of nickel and electrically stimulating it. And the idea was to find drugs that would stop the brain's cells in an animal dying if they had a lack of oxygen, and to understand the chemistry and what chemicals you could put in there to prevent the chemistry that causes the brain to not be able to kickstart itself back. So what they did is, what he was doing is he was stimulating it with this electrical signals, and then he would flood it with liquid helium. And liquid helium is basically the coolest stuff known to man. It's like 4 Kelvin. And this would freeze the chemistry first he would flood it with hydrogen, and that starts the death process of the cell. And then he would fill it with the helium, and that would freeze the chemistry at certain points after the triggering of the death. And then they could analyze the chemistry in the otherwise dormant processes going on in the frozen brain cell. And what he found was he kept doing this, stimulating it with electricity, flooding it with hydrogen, killing it, and then putting in the cryogenic cooling. And one time it suddenly started boiling the helium, and it was 250 watts of cooling going into this little chamber, and it was boiling the helium. In fact, it boiled it so fast it broke the device. And he's thinking, where on earth is this heat coming from? All I've got in there is nickel and hydrogen and a little bit of electricity stimulation. Where is it coming from? And so he then worked with Sergio Ficcardi, University of Bologna, who's one of the brilliant genius of a nuclear scientist. And then they did these particularly successful series of experiments with nickel rods, sometimes with processed nickel on there. And they published in Il Nuovo Cemento, which is one of the primary physics journals in Italy. And when I started this whole process, I wanted to go and see him, and I tried to reach out to him. And it was only when we were starting to look at a rather colorful character called Andrea Rossi, you probably know only too well.
I followed every bit of it in 2011.
Right. So yeah, I put my deposit down for 2.
Did you put a deposit
my name in line for two devices, and since then I've had 2 replacement boilers. So it would have been great if I could have had one.
That's crazy. I remember when all that was going on. I can't believe it's almost 15 years ago now.
Yeah. I was considering selling my house and putting some money in to support the effort. And since then I've met Roger Green, who practically did that. He was the initial investor.
Just so people know, like this is a secondary interest of mine on a personal level, and has been almost as long as the Younger Dryas event.
Right.
In fact, it precedes it, because it goes back to 88 with Pons and Fleischmann.
Yeah, there we go.
And I only go back to 94 with the Younger Dryas event.
Right.
And they've always been, I got a lot of fascinations, like all of Cosmic Summit people do. We're curious as hell. But I'd have to say my top 2 were Younger Dryas event and Cold Fusion. And then they kind of merge a little bit.
Yeah, well, we might get onto that, George. Yeah, so basically, I wanted to meet him, and there was no communication, no feedback, and this went on from
This was Martin Fleischmann.
No, Martin Fleischmann had died in a few weeks, 3 weeks before ICCF 17 in 2012. So I unfortunately I never met him. And that's why the project is called the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. We wanted to come up with a name at the conference, and the death of Martin Fleischmann, and it just seemed fitting and respectful to try and find a way to understand what he, at least in the West, initiated the process of thinking about. And anyway, so this was late 2014. We were just starting to replicate analogs of Andrea Rossi, and we got contacted by Piantelli. He wanted to meet us because essentially the story was Rossi originally went to Piantelli. Piantelli refused to work with him because of his past. And so he then went to work with Ficcardi. That really angered Piantelli. Okay. And he didn't like Rossi as a character. And he thought, this was going to bring disrespect to Ficcardi. And Ficcardi was suffering mentally at that time, so he thought that he was using him. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we went there. We went there again in January, having raised the money to bring people. In 6 weeks, we raised enough money to bring people from 7 different countries to come down and do tests. Of course, he wasn't so keen to do tests there, but he did spend 5 days with us. And he went through the entire process in a way that he'd never done before. He revealed secrets he'd never done before, things that aren't even in his patent. And I've made those all public since. But essentially, he said, don't tell nature what it is, let it show you. And from that moment, I switched from looking at what I was told to look at, which is neutrons, gamma, X-rays, and so forth, and excess heat, to looking at what I can see in the process and after the process. And it was, and maybe we'll get on to this, I was invited, we'd done a couple of replications in the following year or so, 2016, and it was early 2017, I had realized basically it was something to do with ball lightning. And in early 2017, I was asked to go and speak at Stanford Energy Club's inaugural kind of like meeting with Carl Page, was organizing it.
Larry Page's brother, the founder of Google.
Yeah, the founder of Google's brother. And I talked first, that was the first time I introduced the fact that I thought was ball lightning going on. But actually, as I was going in, I actually said to my colleagues, Brian Alverston and Alan Goldwater at the time, I said, I think this is to do with exotic vacuum objects, Ken Shoulder's work, and I think it's the same as John Hutchison's work. So that was in January. And then by the 3rd week in February, I was sitting in my house, and I won't go into the full story. I'd been invited by Mahadevan Srinivasan, who was one of the 2 lead authors. He was the lead author on the initial first 6 months replication of Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons at the Bradbury Atomic Research Center. He had invited me in 2017 to come and work with some of their scientists, some students, and some people that were willing to come and listen to the talk. About how to get nickel hydrogen reactors working. So I was doing the responsibility of the project, and at project donors' expenses. I didn't ask for any money from him. We paid for the flights. I went over there, and I was sitting down in my kitchen, and I realized that this process was the same as Ken Shoulder's EVOs, the same as John Hutchison's Hutchison effect. And if that's the case, then, and I was considering these concepts that Dr. George Eagley, one of the world's greatest experts in ball lightning, was telling me about, how ball lightning can go through windows sometimes, or even metal, and not do anything, but sometimes it can go through and it can leave a round hole. And to cut a long story short, as a child, we had a farm, and then we had a campsite, and we were able to rent out this campsite to caravanners, and they would sometimes leave their caravan behind, or because it was shot, or a broken car, they wouldn't tow it to the dump. And my father was quite liberal and allowed me to, and my brothers to, break these down for scrap. And sometimes we just set light to them, or we used Molotov cocktails and threw them at them and watched them explode, or put bombs in them and stuff. And essentially,
I've heard a lot of stories about your upbringing, and you did not have helicopter parents nor a trauma mama.
No, I didn't have those.
Y'all grabbed that acetylene torch, and your dad lit it for you and said,
"Yeah, exactly." No, actually, one day he gave me a flamethrower, a World War II flamethrower.
Yeah, right.
Brass museum piece. He said, "Go around the field and light the weeds up." Because they were all dry at the end of the summer.
That's a fun way to grow up.
Iron fence. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I had seen cars that had burned completely out, and I've seen many since here from Ukraine. I've seen them here. They've been parked here as like, this is what's going on in Ukraine, and here's a burnt out car, and they had a story about it. But this was in my childhood, and I'd never seen the steel melt or anything. And I came to the conclusion that, and I had in the back of my head that what I saw on 9/11 were some of these things that I call the event. And this is like the last great taboo, this is the only remaining conspiracy theory that hasn't been proved true, right? And
it's getting a lot closer. If I
yeah,
may,
well,
I'm so
I
glad
know.
you got into 9/11 because that's
Yeah,
kind of what inspired me to bring you on the show.
yeah, I know. So I'm getting to the point where
No, I love it. I never even told you that. I'm glad you got to it without me
right,
having a question. You go.
right. So yeah, I got to this point where I'm sitting down and I'm going, oh my God, right. Maybe 9/11 was done with this technology. I said, right, I'm going to do a scientific test, right, on evidence-based. We know ball lightning will make round holes in windows if it was involved, right? And microball lightning is an aspect of the technology. So I sat down and I typed into Google. I said round holes, windows, 9/11, ground zero, something like that, and it came up with all of these pictures, and they were from buildings around ground zero with windows with round holes in them. And I go, and I was in a state of shock. I'm going to be going to India. I'm going to be speaking to people in the nuclear authority over there. And I have to completely change my presentation. I'm going to lose a massive amounts of respect that I've built up in the community. But I don't have a filter that says I'm willing to lie about how I feel about how something works. I don't have that. I don't have a tenure to lose. I don't have a big fat salary to worry about. I don't have, kids being paid for at college by someone else that would ask me to walk if I said something untoward. So I thought, I've got to say this, and I thought, okay. And then down the bottom of the picture it said Dr. Judy Wood. I thought, who's Dr. Judy Wood? So I did a search on it, came up with this website called Where Did the Towers Go? And I thought, okay, so she's made a connection that this does this and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but she doesn't know that it's Ken Shoulders. And then she has 3 whole pages on Ken Shoulders. And I go, yeah, but she doesn't know it's anything to do with John Hutchison effect. And at that time, I didn't know one had come from the other in such clarity. And she has pages on the John Hutchison effect. And I'm going, you are kidding me. She had come from as a structural engineer all the way through to realizing that this was explained by Ken Shoulders' work and John Hutchison's work. And Ken Shoulders' work was born out of John Hutchison's work to a degree. I've since found out that, and I made this public in the second presentation at Cosmic Summit, that actually Ken Shoulders worked with Winston Bostic on plasmoids,
which is a fascinating story. I recommend Robert Temple's book.
Yeah, so basically, this picture emerged, and I was going, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to change this." So I had 3 days of trauma. I presented the first 2 hours on how the technology works, and the second 2 hours on the fact that 9/11 was done with this technology. And Mahadev and Srinivasan was like this, and some of the other nuclear scientists were like this. The 7 students that were there, like, what did I just watch? But there was a guy in the room called Suhas Ralkar, and immediately I finished my presentation, he chased me, he tapped me on the shoulders, he says, "We need to talk." And basically, I was meant to go out with the students the following day to have a tour around Mumbai, because I tend to just fly in somewhere, work, and then leave. I don't even know where I am. It's just another hotel room and another presentation room. So, but they wanted to show me around, and then this guy invited me to his lab, and I saw some of these effects in the lab in the following morning. That I was predicting was possible. And he said, I've spent 4 years of my life and nearly $1 million of loan to work out what you just said. And he's a world expert in ultrasonics, and his wife is an expert in chemistry, and they're in their 70s. Like, this is the sum total of their knowledge from their life and building technologies. And they observed when they were doing this cleaning of this animal fat off iron sheet that was going to be zinc dipped, they used an ultrasound thing, and he found these white spots, and the white spots had oxyptite in there. And he said, I don't know where this is coming from. It's big splotch of transmutation caused by intense sound. How are we making new elements that are not in the fat and they're not in the water or whatever? Where is it coming from? And so that started his journey on transmutation. And it was in his lab that I had some high-speed cameras with me, that I took some video of this column with this large 19.46 kilohertz tube with loads of sound transducers at the top, to putting in about 1.5 kilowatts of 19.46 kilohertz sound. And it had these bubble and these toroidal structures coming out. And I did it at 240 frames a second, so I could see how they would flow into each other. And that completely changed my journey from that point on, because I could see what nature was doing. It's like a smoke ring coming out of your mouth.
Bob, I knew about the involvement with 9/11. I want to speak to that a little bit more in just a second, personally, why I wanted to talk about it. But I didn't know that you discussing 9/11 kind of inspired someone to come to you.
If I had not discussed 9/11, I would not really know how it would work. And I would not know how anti-gravity would work. I would not know how cold fusion would work. And I would not have been able to connect it to ancient iconography symbols.
I thought it was just tangential to your story, but
no,
it actually led.
Absolutely. My literally potentially blowing my reputation and ending my career, such that it was in this field, was the door through which I had to go to be shown that, but one, it's real, and two, that it gave me that initial view on hydrodynamics in middle of 2017. I then was able, my brain was cued to seeing it under the Lion experiments, to see the fractal hydrodynamics running under the cold fusion, which is a diamond, nickel, deuterium oxide based cold fusion reactor that worked 4 times in a row by Neil Kreingold, the late Neil Kreingold, sadly another person that probably died from the jab.
Bob, I'd like in just a moment, your wildest speculation on 9/11, because here's kind of where I was on this. When we went to India, we had plenty of time to talk, as you do at such things, sitting around the hotel, and you got into 9/11, and I didn't know you carried an opinion on it. I think we talked about it once subsequently, but I was horrified because you were just becoming my guru, and you want all the gurus things to fit with where you, and I was like, oh gosh, he's a 9/11 conspiracy guy, and he's tied his wonderful science and esoteric knowledge into this thing that I can't swallow. So it was out of, I think, Overton windows, the term, but that's my personal Overton window.
It fell well outside.
And that is not an uncommon reaction by far. And I'm a little bit I'm embarrassed to say, or whatever, making amends now. But Tucker Carlson opened the Overton window on this subject very wide in the last month or so, and did a 3-part 9/11
effort. I mean, I'm not so interested in who did it and why they did it. I mean, the why you can see from what happened afterwards, right? So although I think a large proportion of that, other than the restricting of freedoms and the more spying, were an utter failure.
Well, give me your speculation, and then your evidence in a minute. But if you will, just for the sexy part first, your conclusions based on the evidence lead you to speculate what brought down the towers, what happened.
So if you're going to have an explanation, the explanation must explain the magnetometers in Alaska.
Okay, please proceed, sir.
So what Judy Wood did was put together a book of evidence. Now, she's not saying necessarily what did it, although she does show that the work of Ken Shoulders explains the work of John Hutchison, and John Hutchison's actual artifacts, physical artifacts, some of which I have in this room, show the same kind of thing going on as was observed, which cannot be explained by normal engineering, right? Okay. So one, magnetometers. So there's 7 magnetometers in Alaska, and those were showing at the point of the impact of the first plane all the way through to the collapse of Building 7, severe anomalies before returning to normal. It must explain.
Just so people understand it, a magnetometer is what?
It's showing the Earth's magnetic field.
Okay. And so the magnetic field saw a flux in Alaska
on 7 different things, thousands of kilometers apart, miles apart. a long way away. This is in Alaska. This is not next to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So like you would want magnetometers to be near a pole of the Earth. So it's sensible that they are in Alaska or in the northern hemisphere then, and not necessarily around the equator. Your magnetometers are going to give you a better reading, so you would cite them there. But they all 7 of them in these disparate locations showed these fluctuations, and you can see the events. The first plane hit, the second plane hit, the first building fall, the third, the second tower falling, and then building 7, and then it returns to normal.
Well, I wanted to distinguish it from a seismometer, when someone could believe that the tallest buildings in the world.
I mean, when you come to seismometers, the buildings falling didn't really leave a signature.
Oh yeah, but you would have seen it at Rutgers in New Jersey or something, maybe, right? I mean, you could. Yeah. It might be a little shake. Okay, but just to distinguish it, this is a wave, not of earthquake like kinetic energy, but a flux in magnetism. Why would that occur?
I'll come to that. I'm telling you the things that you must explain in any theory that is not the government theory. So the government conspiracy is a bunch of people whose passports don't burn, and who some of them apparently are still alive after the event, even though they were actually flying these planes, although there's no evidence of them getting on the planes. There's all these things. That's not my bag, right? Mm-hmm. That is the government conspiracy theory. Okay, a person that's already dead, and another one that's still flying in Saudi Arabia. They apparently flew the hijacked planes, right? So, and they're still on the list as the people that did it, even though all these anomalies have been found, which make the whole official conspiracy theory totally absurd, right? And that Tucker, to be fair, did not go into those aspects, right? Tucker opened the crack on the door to the Overton, on the window.
Yeah,
he opened the crack, but really, you can't stop there, Tucker. You can't just stop at the start.
Yeah,
you need to delve into that in a little bit more detail. And he went into areas that are in no real material difference. You can't go back and change who did it and why. You can fix what happened afterwards to the best of your ability. You can't bring back all the people that died as a result of it, which is the bit that I really care about, all the death and mayhem that was sanctioned by that. But anyway, so the second thing is the Global Consciousness Project. If you cannot explain their observation that atomic clocks around the world change their decay rate with planes going into a building, then you've got a problem, right?
Change the decay rate of atomic clocks, which they use.
Now they said it was because
it's so regular.
Exactly. They say it's because there was humans focusing their attention, and it was a conscious change in the way that the thing works. That is not the explanation.
Hold on, who is they there? That not certainly
Global Consciousness Project. They said it was the attention of so many humans on the events that day that literally warped time.
Okay, fair enough, and also
that's their explanation, but not yours. That's a completely different explanation to what I would have. Right. The next one is the spark on the building of the planes. As they're approaching the building, you see from multiple angles there's a spark. Okay. Now, this is actually a very easy one to explain. A lot of people have said it's some explosion that goes off before, or some sort of whatever. A guy called Russ George visited me a number of years ago when he was interested in some of the work that we were doing. And he talked, I did a video, and it's on our SoundCloud, which I called Muons in a Bottle. And the reason I called it Muons in a Bottle was because he said that they have these special devices which can collect muons. And when a plane lands, a plane must be grounded because it collects massive amounts of static charge. Mm-hmm. But he said they're actually collecting the muons, not the static charge. I think they're collecting charge clusters. And to put it into context, Henry Murray went into the desert and put up a big panel to collect static electricity. Nikola Tesla went into the desert and put up a very big copper sphere to collect static electricity. If you go to the top of a mountain in an arid place, your hair stands on end. Why? Because there's a lot of static electricity. If you go to the top of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, you will get a static effect. There is an electrical potential between the top and the bottom. Okay, so a plane, which is a piece of metal, can aggregate charge clusters as it's flying through the air. When the plane gets close to the building, it's a sheet of aluminium all the way down to Earth. It's literally a lightning conductor. So this is the most easy thing to explain. As it approaches the building, there's a discharge of this charge between the plane and the building. Okay, so that's an easy one to explain. Now, if you want to do the effect that I believe may explain all of the above, there's Hurricane Erin. Hurricane Erin, we've known since the Boeing patents and probably from Tesla time that there are ways to manipulate weather systems. There's a guy who, well, essentially, basically, this weather system, it was a Category 4 storm. It came all the way to New York, parked itself off New York, and then once the buildings had fallen, it then moved away, right? And it wasn't reported on the day because it was off the coast. But what it'll do is it'll produces a large potential in the sky next to ground, and it polarizes the vacuum. So it's exactly what goes on in the Hutchison effect. You need to polarize the vacuum to create the flux in a particular direction. Okay, and then you have cases of levitation going on. There's David Hanschert, New York Daily News. He was carried a block and lost his cell phone and cameras. There was the loss of the mass of the building, large amounts of the dust.
That didn't make sense to me right off the bat.
They're able to walk around in the subterranean levels. The idea that it all went into a hole is just nonsense, because they're able to walk around in the parking lot and in the metro system, and it's basically not collapsed in. So what's happened there? Clearly, a lot of dust floated away, and in fact, one of the pictures that Judy was looking for was a satellite picture, and in her book, Where Did the Towers Go? She actually shows this satellite photo by NASA on the day of 9/11 with this huge plume of dust going away. And that is when she found Hurricane Erin, because it's sitting there on the same satellite photo. This massive hurricane. It's sitting off the coast.
On September 11th. That's hurricane season. I've never heard such a thing.
Yeah, I think
explain the planes to me. I think I asked you that in India.
Well, it's the government conspiracy theory, isn't it? It's that the planes were involved. They may have been painted. It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. The day of 9/11,
were there actual planes involved?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
That's a good answer.
I wasn't there. I saw.
And actually, you never speak to anything that you don't see yourself generally.
Well, I know that at the time I could have faked those very, very easily, because I had a DPS edit bay. I literally had the skills and the video equipment to fake those videos. Right? And the videos always
in India, and I you don't mean to play skeptard or anything, but people were asking these questions that are listening. Yeah, you can fake video, and you used to be in the business of animation.
I did CG.
Yeah, CG and video manipulation. So you can actually speak this stuff. But doesn't that presume that aren't there a number of people in Manhattan that happen to be looking up that did see something in the sky?
Some people, if you look at some of the testimonies, a lot of people's testimonies are what they were told to think. And if you want to, some other people say, well, it didn't really look like a normal passenger plane. It was blacked out and there was no windows. This is all irrelevant. On the day of the event, I have taken delivery of a Mexican-style chimney for my garden. It's literally come to the door in the morning of 9/11, and I'm building it in my garden. And the phone goes off, and it's Fateh. Fateh was a Libyan football player, and he became a diplomat and came to the UK. He married an English woman, and that English woman's their daughter was my girlfriend for about 5 years. And he phones me up and says, Bob, terrible news, terrible news. I said, what's wrong, Fatty? He says, oh my God, terrible news, turn on the news, turn on the news. And so I turned it on. This was before the second tower had been hit. Now, that chimney was made of mild steel, cast iron, basically. I could burn anthracite, the hottest burning hydrocarbon you can get. And I could burn it in there till the end of time. And it would never even get close to melting, right?
Right.
Now, I visited the 9/11 Museum for the first time I've been to New York since I stood on the South Tower in 1999, right? Or 1998, in October the 10th, one of those 2 years.
Yeah.
And I went to the 9/11 Museum. Some of the steel there is like 4 inches thick.
Yeah.
Right? And that's at the bottom. It's like a wedding cake. It's like having a piece of paper at the top and saying that that piece of paper at the top can crush a Titanic at the bottom, because it gets thinner and thinner and thinner all the way up.
It is curious. It reminds me of the Carolina Bays. Now, that's a stretch, but it's like if somebody just said, what happened to that building, and showed you just a generic video of it or whatnot, you'd say, well, it went poof. It didn't fall down. It kind of just
poof is the right phrase.
It went poof. But then you are explained, like the Carolina Bays, oh no, that isn't something that came from above and hit. That's a combination of wind, water. But intuitively, you look at it and you say, well, it went poof. So
there are testimonies of people saying that there are basically no pieces of glass found from the buildings. That is 2 110-story buildings, which had a lot of windows.
Covered with glass, and there's no glass.
Yes. Now, there's a very interesting experience in the 1980s by a guy who discovered Ormus. And he was trying to work out what Ormus was, and he bought this tungsten arc crucible. And it basically has a big copper sort of bowl that you put your sample in, and you have a big tungsten electrode. And he shot it, and what happened was the whole piece of tungsten immediately disappeared. And it was meant to be good for 2,000 smelting events, right? And then we thought, well, okay, well, let's try that again. So we put a new electrode in, the size of my thumb, and did it again, and it disappeared. And you know what? The glass in the laboratory outside of the furnace put through him on the back wall of the laboratory. All of the glassware had started to crumble, fragment and crumble. Now, whilst some people had said there was no glass there, in the central part of the museum, there was about 6 pieces that they said were from the towers. Then they were about that big.
Right.
Okay. So up until going to the museum, the testimony was there was never any glass found. Okay. There was no computer CPU units. There was no filing cabinets except for one. Okay. There was something like 40,000 filing cabinets, and the paper was all over New York, but where are the filing cabinets gone? Okay. This one that was found was actually in the subterranean level. Remember, the level that wasn't completely destroyed. They walked in, and basically it was from Ben & Jerry's. And and it would look like a spaceship that had crumpled up. It literally looks like an alien spaceship. It's like this.
It's a file cabinet?
It's a filing cabinet. And when they took this filing cabinet apart, they found all of the coins, despite the metals in the coins having massively different melting temperatures, had fused together, but still kept their embossing on them. Absolutely impossible with normal physics. If your plane's melting at 70-story up, does not explain how the metal fuses together with all different melting point metals. And you know what? The paper in the banknotes were not even singed, and they were returned to the Ben & Jerry's owner. So how does all the metal fuse together, but the paper, which ignites at Fahrenheit 451, how does that happen?
Well, how does it happen, Bob? That's why we have you here with us today.
The other thing is, when you're coming out, and you can't take any photos in that central zone of the museum, they have a Bible, and the Bible was recovered from according to the only person who was able to go into Ground Zero. It's a Jewish chap who was able to take photographs. He was the official photographer. This fireman came up to him and said, look at this artifact. And it was basically, and this is the description of the photographer, it's a Bible fused to molten steel, right? That is actually impossible because I've seen the Bible physically in front of me in this part of the museum, and the paper is not singed. And you know what's really spooky about it?
What?
It's on the page, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And I say unto you, turn the other cheek, essentially.
Well, quite a coincidence and probably a fitting one.
Yes.
But they didn't arrange the
I don't know.
to
But
leave that
you
little
have very fine, you know how you get those Bibles where the paper is basically tissue paper?
Yeah, some of the thinnest paper you ever read.
How
yeah.
on earth can that not ignite when you've got steel molten on it?
It makes absolutely no sense. But why does that suggest something that involves low energy nuclear reaction?
We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Okay. I'm not rushing. Yeah, I just
as
want to
you're
make sure
coming
you
out,
get there.
as you're coming out of that area, you're not allowed to take a photograph, right? There is some of this extremely thick steel, and it is bent like a noodle without any cracks or fractures on the welds or on the length of the box frame. It's a box frame that's bent like that. It's so surreal. You look at it and go, what on earth happened there? How is that even possible? Okay, then there are these things called the seismic signals. We talked about those. So if your plane going into the building with the jet fuel, now bearing in mind anthracite cannot burn normal mild steel, right? That's the hottest hydrocarbon. It cannot burn. It cannot. My chimney that day when I set it off, it never failed. It never failed, right? Let alone kerosene. And when I was given a flamethrower by my father as a young teenager, it burned all the cellulose, but it didn't burn the thin wire on the barbed wire fencing. All the cellulose, right? So a thin 3 millimeter barbed wire piece of wire does not melt, and all the cellulose burns. When I'm putting big kerosene. He said kerosene. It was so surreal. My dad never. It's called diesel in the UK, but he said kerosene. It's the most weird thing. And then basically you have these noodles. Then you have these things called the seismic signal. Where was the seismic signal? So if the plane's going into the building does not explain the seismic signal, then you've got a problem. And then
seismic, hold on, you're differentiating that from the magnetometers.
You're totally different. One is the vibration that comes out when a thing falls onto the ground.
Right.
Magnetometers are measuring a magnetic field fluctuation in the magnetic field of the Earth.
But that's right. But the magnetism showed a fluctuation. There was no seismicity.
It was very much less than the King Dome, which was only like, I don't know, very much shorter building. You don't have to think about whatever took it down. The seismic signal was not sufficient for the height of the building. Whatever took it down.
Okay, this is not a gotcha, but I gotta say, it didn't even occur to me to. I was in D.C. to testify to Congress the following day,
right?
And we were on the Potomac at the closest hotel to the Pentagon, and we were watching the first tower, damaged.
So everyone was looking at the tower; they weren't watching at the Tomahawk cruise missile going into the Pentagon.
That's right. Then the second one fell. I don't know. And then whatever, my wife and I felt the damn thing hit the Pentagon.
Yeah, right.
And then started seeing smoke. And she said, well, what happened? What happened? What happened? I said, well, that's just the elevator. That's why the room shook. We've got a bad elevator around here. I heard it all night. Making no sense. She's a newlyweds. And she said, but look, there's smoke over there. There's smoke. And I said, they're burning leaves. They're burning leaves. It's September 11th. Then I was sitting there making up.
You were trying to calm her.
Yeah, trying to calm her. And then she said, or then we were watching the TV and they said the thing, oh no, we saw a helicopter and then a jet. And then boom, it was on the TV. And I said, we got to get the hell out of here. And I immediately went out because I didn't have any gas in my truck. I said, I'm going to go get gas, honey, and we're going to get you back to North Carolina. We got to get the hell out of this town. And got out there and immediately got stuck in gridlock traffic.
Of course,
in the car. Yeah. And she's back in the thing. So then I turned, just to tell the story. So then I turned onto the median, this road out of median that runs through Southeast Washington, Southwest, and drove down the median like Mad Max back to the hotel to my newlywed. And then we posted up there, for the rest of the evening. But if I felt it hit the Pentagon, some things had to fall. I mean, what were they doing?
I mean, there's General Stubblebine, and he was an expert in doing satellite reconnaissance. He's dead, but he said that his assessment of the photos, that the turbine in there was a cruise missile turbine.
Okay, so that's not necessarily an energy.
There were some people that were like right next to where it went in the building, and they walked out.
I know some of them because the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was right on the edge there. And I was actually laying in my bed that morning, all mad at myself, saying I wasted the day in D.C. I should have gone and seen my regulators at the Pentagon, because that's where they regulate wetlands, believe it or not. But strangely enough, I was worried about not being in the rooms that were right beside what fell apart.
Yeah, no surprise.
And that's right. They could walk up to the edge or whatever, glance out the thing. Nobody was like sightseeing, you know, but yeah, it was that kind of thing. It just was either there or it wasn't. So weird. I did not mean to insert myself into 9/11.
That's
it didn't
fine,
even
but
occur to me until now, but yeah.
You know, you've got a personal visceral memory from that. I think probably everyone that was of a certain age or higher have their own memory. Like I say, my memory was, you know, building that iron chimney and literally having an Arab phoning me up and who was formerly from Libya. And by the way, he hated Gaddafi. This is all before, you know, people died. Sort of thing. Yeah, so whatever. It's all kinds of trauma in the world, and I think that was the entire point of it. That, you know, whichever conspiracy theory turns out to be true in the fullness of time, you know. But I'm meeting increasingly people who were not even alive when it happened, and in fact, we're going to get to the point very soon when most people on planet Earth were not born before 9/11.
God, that makes you feel old.
So the time is now, because anyway, what I will say is, and I feel for all of the people that died or suffered because they lost a loved one. The millions of people that died as a result of the wars, the trillions of money that was spent from the UK and the US that the taxpayers are now suffering for and having to make difficult decisions over, and all of the millions of people that were displaced. That said, if it wasn't for whoever did whatever, regardless, I would not have been able to understand the technology that I've been able to share with people.
Go through a little bit more of the evidence. I mean, everything from melting cars.
Okay, so there's things called, there's a noodle thing, which is like how do things turn to jelly and lose their structural integrity. There's another thing that Judy Wood calls Cheetos. He calls them Cheetos because they're basically sitting there and glowing orange. This is basically glowing metal right next to unburnt paper. And I'm going to say something publicly for the first time now. I've been testing a technology that's been replicated by a maverick and genius called Griffin Brock. And Griffin Brock has replicated the Tesla shadowgraph tube for the first time in over 120 years. He's also done it in a way that it produces live X-rays. That is to say, they're not real X-rays, they are shadowgraphs. And they're much better than X-rays because they don't produce a divergent beam. So in the case of an X-ray, you have to be very close to the source, and the detector has to be very close to the thing that you're passing the X-rays through. It's why? Because they fire a high energy electron beam, say, into a piece of tungsten, and it produces a spray of X-ray particles. In this, it produces co-limited rays. That is basically columns, like light coming from the sun that produces hard shadows. And so it produces high contrast. Even at 50 feet away, you can produce good X-rays. That's how co-limited it is. Now, in one of our chats, because I've been looking at this technology for radiation remediation, and I'm going to be talking about what our findings are, and it's absolutely stunning, by the way. But it is producing these energy solitons, this etheric matter, this dark light that Tesla called it. Essentially, he was talking about his experiences, and he talked about how in one of his experiments, the electrode glowed bright orange or orange. And I said, just say that again. It glowed orange. I said, that's not possible. He said, why? I said, because aluminium melts before you can visibly see its color glowing.
Yeah, never seen anything aluminum glow.
You can, if you go into a dark room and aluminium is just below its melting temperature, you can just see a faint glow. But in any other lighting conditions, it's not glowing. Now,
What
if you
is
heat
that
it up
color
as a
other than
molten
it's
liquid, it'll glow like anything else, like black body radiation. If you have aluminium and it's at 1200 or 1500 degrees, then, but it tends to ignite. You know, you can even ignite aluminium at 600 and something degrees. Some people have found. Okay, you just need to remove the oxide layer, and it reacts very powerfully with air.
like magnesium.
Not like magnesium. Magnesium's a little bit more.
But same thing, a metal that burns.
Yeah, it's a metal that burns, especially if it's vaporized. Okay,
Yeah.
so the thing is that this is what Judy Wood found evidence for in the NIST photos. These are publicly released photos. You have these objects, these what look like metallic objects, and they're glowing orange. There's even a photo of like a digger pulling a piece of metal out of the ground, and it's glowing orange. Now, this is what John Hutchison observed. He observed metal that was glowing orange, but not hot. And in one of those cases, Alec Pizarro, who was working with him at the time, came over. He turned off the electromagnetic system, and that glowing orange thing stopped glowing orange. And as he went over, it wasn't just that it was not hot. It was actually cooler. He could feel it be, you know how you approach an ice cube and it feels cold? This is how it felt cooler than his hand, like it's sucking IR photons from your hand. And then when he went to pick it up, his fingers went into the metal and it left fingerprints in there, and it smeared as he went up. He went in about 4 millimeters into the aluminium. Now, this is interesting because I was recounting this story back in 2017 on the third trip to go and see Suhas Ralkar in India, because he was not playing ball. And so we got to talk about stuff to make sure we were using the time effectively. And he talked about this anecdote because for 2 decades he was instructed to go around, and then when the electricity board said someone had a lightning strike or a ball lightning strike, can you go and investigate? He would go and document these things in Hungary. And one of the cases he documented was this guy. He was in a train, and he's going along in the train, and this ball lightning like structure comes along, and it's kind of moving along with the train, and it then just touches the window frame, which is made of aluminium. And the account is that for about 20 minutes, he was able to manipulate the aluminium with his fingers.
Really? Tell us what ball lightning is, the history of ball lightning research.
Well, it's an extremely long history. They did a study back in the 80s or 90s or something in the past, and they found that like 1 in 10 people have seen some form of thing that could be described as ball lightning. It ranges from extremely small, like millimeters across, up to something that appears to be the size of a barn. There's a very, very good and I think very authentic ball lightning structure that was captured in Canada very recently. It got a lot of press.
Oh, really? Videoed?
Really good video. And when it dies, just after it dies, it reveals 3 small ball lightnings inside that then fade away.
No kidding.
Absolutely.
Because there are some great ball lightning videos, but not enough. It's kind of like you can see
there's some really terribly fake ones, which people seem to roll out repeatedly, even when, so anyway, but this
what
one.
What about that one that jumps along the railroad track?
That's the fake one.
Is that the fake one? That's why I brought it up. Okay.
It's done by a Scandinavian. It's easy for me as a CG artist to see when something is fake like that. But the one is, in my view, very real. And it's very real secondarily because when it dies, it breaks into 3 small structures, which are the right quantization and scale size for the macro object that first is observed. So it's a very, very good demonstration of the phenomena at work on a macro scale. Now it's scale invariant, but the fields inside are much higher when it's smaller.
Well, what does it look like, again, for people that are kind of new to the subject? Ball lightning is, what kind of phenomena is it? Why could it ever?
Ball lightning is the thing that no one wants to talk about in the mainstream physics community because they have no explanation for it. But I realized that it is the key to fusion, and it is the key to faster than light transportation, to anti-gravity, to teleportation, to transmutation, to all of the magic, all of the important magic that would that they call complete fucking magic. Excuse my French, you'll have to put a beep in there in military circles. And then after I gave my presentation at ICCF 26 in Morioka in Japan in May, I have been given another 60 kilograms of Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto's work. It's interesting, in the first 142 kilograms that I got, he had three things. His experiments, some videos from the late 1990s or early 1990s on crop circles. And the only other videos he had in his collection that he hand-picked for me were videos of 9/11.
Really? I didn't know that Matsumoto picked up on that too. Tell us who he is and why he's important, because you've done great work preserving his
life. So I'm doing it's called, he wrote this book in 2000 called Steps to the Discovery of Electronuclear Collapse. He started out, as many people did after Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons, doing the kind of replications of palladium deuterium. He found that inside his electrodes there was metal being consumed and disappearing, right? Inside the electrodes, when he cut them open, there's metal disappearing, and around the disappeared metal you had transmuted elements that were not in the original electrode. He also observed when you heated that up in a residual gas analyzer, he was finding tritium, helium, neon, other elements, gases in there that were synthesized as well. So not only solid elements, but gases being synthesized. And these are not your normal elements other than helium that you would expect from DD fusion. Okay, so cut a long story short, by 1993-4, he had been told by a guy called Ed Lewis, who worked with some of the pioneers of cold fusion, that these are the same things as plasmoids and microball lightning. And he realized that that was the case. And then after he started talking about microball lightning, the Fusion Technology Journal of the American Nuclear Society stopped making it possible for him to publish his work. And that's very interesting, because the following year, in May 1995, the Air Force under R.R. Roth published a paper saying what the fusion community can learn from ball lightning. This was in May 1995. Now, let me guess,
it's not still available.
What happened in 1995 is, right as Matsumoto was showing how this works and repeatedly showing the process, was he was sent something by two Californian researchers. I'm going to try and remember the name, but I don't remember offhand right now.
That's right.
But Bennett and Cooley, right? These Bennett and Cooley. And I found these documents after I'd given my presentation in Morioka in this extra 40 kilograms. Okay. And I'm having to scan this because between me and the people traveling with me that were willing to take bags back to Europe, I didn't have enough space. And so I had to take the documents that weren't so important and scan them and basically dump them. They were like other people's papers, which he had annotated, for instance, from other cold fusion conferences, all the way up to 2019, actually. He read everyone's papers meticulously. And in this work, there were a whole bundle kept together of documents from Cooley and Bennett. And in there, he'd kept the actual post-dated stamped envelopes as well, stapled to each of the documents in sequence. There was this absolute insane levels of documentation. And what they were doing was citing Ken Shoulder's work via Hal Fox, who had actually bought the patents, Takaaki Matsumoto, a Russian and an Italian group, getting very close to what they had, Cooley and Bennett, in their patent application in early 1995. And in this briefing document that they sent to Bill Clinton, to the press secretary of Al Gore, to all of the heads of the national labs, to the editor of Fusion Technology, to all of the major energy channels and the major press, was this. In our system, it creates a self-confining plasma structure, magnetohydrodynamics, ball lightning fusion technology, like a mini sun. They're literally saying what I found out. And the diagram that they show is exactly what I've shown at Cosmic Summit in the last 2 years as the key basis. And the point which they say is where the fusion occurs is literally where I've identified from looking at stuff under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
There's this guy called Stephen Crivet. Stephen Crivet had an 11-year crusade, and he managed to get the people that are working on the ITER, the International Fusion Project in Europe, that's been funded by the US, for Russia, by China, by Japan, whatever, South Korea and UK.
These Rube Goldberg machines that
massive,
are
massive 40-story or whatever it is structure. I don't know. It's absurd. He managed to get them after 11 years to admit it will never produce more power electrical out than goes in, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's always been an obfuscation, i.e. keeping people from the truth. So this guy, I find that he had published one of these documents that was in the Matsumoto archive, and it was within 2 weeks of Matsumoto receiving a document which was a transferal of technology in such a way that it wouldn't impinge upon the patent rights. So Matsumoto was going to get a kit to be able to replicate the technology. He just had to sign on the dotted line, right? 2 or 3 weeks later, Stephen Crivet publishes one of the earlier documents that was sent to Matsumoto, which is which is an abstract from the patent. And at the bottom, because Stephen Crivet is like a bull in a china shop. If someone tells him he can't do something, he's a journalist, he's going to do it. At the bottom, he says, at time of going to press, this patent has been bumped up to the Department of Energy and Department of Defense for classification review. It was classified in 1995. We could have had unlimited energy for 30 years.
Well, that's right. But let's wind back, if you will.
It is ball lightning. It is fusion technology. And the way that I have worked out you can do it is you can do it very simply in a cavitation device, which is just sound, resonant standing wave sound, interfering sound. There is some Italians and Cardone et al. They have found that they could cause transmutation in stainless steel by putting sound into it. And on the standing wave nodes, they get transmuted materials. This is to say they can get fusion in metal using resonant standing wave sound.
Is that like the star in a jar experiment? Does that have any relation to it? I was always...
You've got no jar, it's a lump of metal.
Right.
It's like a building.
You're using that same heat within metal instead of a jar of water.
Well, what it's showing is that on the standing wave nodes, effectively what I've derived is you get a yin-yang structure forming around it. And one very specifically is gravity. That is the yin. That is the condensing force. And the other one is anti-gravity. It's the yang. It's the deconstructing force. Okay? And they work together to create balance. Gravity and anti-gravity waves. And what's literally happened in the last few weeks is, because I proposed that in my 2022 paper, presentation rather, in Assisi in Italy to the cold fusion community. I connected it with the anapole moment, the toroidal moment. The toroidal moment is absolutely critical to this process. But I showed that in cavitation, you're getting this gravity, anti-gravity structure forming. And then depending on the formation, it can ultimately be a gravity or an anti-gravity macro structure at the top level, depending on its fractalization. What's happened recently is I've done a series of presentations. One is Ode Cohere, and the next one is Fly Me to the Moon. And the last one I did as an emergency, for my first ever emergency transmutation, which is Project Time. Those last 3 presentations, what's happened is that in Russia, there's a guy called Chizov. Chizov is an absolute genius. Okay, he won one of the most senior and most important prizes of the Soviet Union. Why? Because he developed the technology to grow large quartz crystals that enabled, for the first time, for the Soviet Union to produce higher powered lasers and everything that comes from that. Everything that comes from that. Okay. So he won this incredible award. So in this presentation, which I shared, I did a detailed translation of it and I shared the slides and so on. he shows that using a laser and an angle grinder in acceleration only, in one way, rotating one way, it pushes the laser beam up. And if you turn the angle grinder over, it pulls it down. That is changing the refractive index of the medium in the same way that occurs when light is trying to go around a sun or a black hole. That is saying it is producing a gravity effect one way and an anti-gravity effect the other way. This can be done by students. I'm in the process of replicating the thing myself. I was absolutely blown away because this is exactly what's going on in a cavitation experiment. You've got a vortex one way and a counter vortex going the other. One is going one way. Now, why does it work? Mm-hmm. In my view, very, very simply, I would argue that all weak processes occur with left-handed chirality electrons and left-handed chirality neutrinos. And neutrinos, relic neutrinos, they are a model of gravity according to Bob McElrath of CERN Theory Group in 2008. Okay, they're standard model compliant model of gravity. And so you're able to use the electron spinning, but it's only when they're accelerating. And what that does is it creates a drag frame in the medium of the ether. And this proves Michelson and Morley wrong. This is absolutely earth-shattering that I've been sharing. And then I find someone sends me this video of this guy called Dr. Joseph Farrell. I've never seen this guy's work. I think I saw a presentation.
Oh, yeah. He's great. He's
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm seeing this presentation this person sent me. I'm going, oh, there's all this stuff about did the Germans make the nuclear bombs and blah, 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 blah.
All sorts of crazy stuff.
Then the second part of the presentation was talking, and he talked about this guy who's essentially worked for General Electric.
Yeah.
His name is Gabriel Kron. And he was I think he was a Jew from the Transylvanian part of it was part of Hungary, or became part of Hungary. But anyway, he came to work in the States. But before he came to work in the States, in fact, he'd been there before. He wrote this paper in I think 1934, and it basically unified electromagnetism and gravity under the circumstance of accelerated rotation. Boom! Gotcha. Absolutely freaking nailed it. Right? Now, what happens?
Bob's signature boom. Okay. Any of his fans are quite familiar with it. You want to go?
I'm going to give you another boom here, and it's exclusive for the audience here.
Lay it on us, buddy, but tee it up.
So, you are creating a topological monopole in these structures and in the fractal substructures of them. Okay. What the Nazi Bell was trying to do was to try and accelerate a mass.
Okay.
Some people say, he says it has thorium in there. Thorium's heavy. He gave some reasons for it. I'm not really interested in those. It's just accelerating a mass, right? Mm-hmm. So you have Eric Laithwaite, and he's moving this gyroscope around, okay? Mm-hmm. And he's able to lift this very, very heavy gyroscope above his head, right? And people say, oh, well, how is that even possible? What Chisholm has done is settled what is going on. If it's accelerating, then it changes the gradient in the ether, so that as you move, so that it produces this anti-gravity effect, which you can see by moving the laser beam, okay? If you've got the gyroscope static, and I want to move it, when I move it, what happens when you spin up a gyroscope, you have to accelerate it, and then it's working, it's doing the anti-gravity effect. Okay. Mm-hmm. The problem is that very soon the anti-gravity effect settles down. It floods in, the ether corrects itself, right? It corrects itself, and so when you reach a terminal speed, you don't get any more anti-gravity effect, okay? But if I move that gyroscope into ether that hasn't stabilized and start churning it, then you get the anti-gravity effect back. That, I'm saying for the first time on this podcast, I believe that's how Eric Laithwaite was able to demonstrate a so-called anti-gravity effect. He's pushing it into fresh ether and it produces a new accelerated gradient. And so he's able to move it around above his head and stuff.
What do you mean fresh ether? That he's moving it through 3D space?
So what's happened is it's the actual change that's important up to a threshold, and I'll come to that, right?
Right.
So as you're accelerating it, you get this effect where electromagnetism and gravity is combined. And in the Chizoff work, this shows itself as effectively a gradient in the it changes the medium basically, and it's the normal medium outside in everywhere, and then a gradient to the point. But what happens is when you reach a terminal velocity, i.e. you're not continuing to accelerate it, then that starts to flatten out. The gradient gets to normalized.
Okay.
Now, that's only for where that thing is. Now, you've got to imagine that the bit of ether next door to it hasn't normalized. And if you push it into that, you gain your anti-gravity effect back, because you're starting to spin that ether and it has to normalize itself. And if you continually push it round, then you get this anti-gravity effect. Now, I think what the Nazis had failed to do is that they were spinning metal. Now, you can go and see these experiments where they take mercury in a toroidal type electrode and they put electricity in it and it spins around. Okay, it's Lenz's law and things like that that's causing it to do that. And I think something like that was what was going on with the bell. It doesn't matter. They have a physical limit by mechanically doing that. Now, at the Cosmic Summit, I argued that the Philadelphia project, and I explained in Fly Me to the Moon how I think that was born out of an 1889 patent of Tesla, where he was creating a new type of homopolar generator, which had two discs, but he changed the magnetic field so he could take the current off. Weirdly, in 1993, just after the end of the Cold War, the people that wrote some of the 9/11 report and were responsible for some of the security there and did psychological operations, a company called SAIC. Yeah. They repatented in 1993 and got awarded a subsection, but basically the same thing for the same reasons as Tesla patented in 1889. Now, why did they feel they needed to do that? I don't know. That's just a weird thing. But I'm saying that Tesla in 1911 in the Sun, New York, said that using the application of this principle, we can produce a flying machine, the world with no screw propeller, or the kind of which the world has never seen before. It has no screw propellers or control surfaces of any kind, and it can travel. It can carry any weight, be made of any shape, and travel in any weather conditions fantastically fast. That was in 1911. So 1889, he has this patent. I believe what he found was, rather than rotating masses, you rotate electromagnetic fields. And this is literally what Eugene Podkletnov is saying he's doing right now, and he's got things levitating in the lab in Finland. Right?
That gets us, I would imagine, to the magnetic toroidal moment.
That gets it to the Philadelphia experiment, but it's the acceleration. Now, the thing is with the electrodynamics, you have a limit there up to a point. But when you're looking at these little ball lightning structures, you have matter in there. The matter becomes coherent and it forms current loops. And the current loops, what they had a problem with the bell is they haven't got the fractal component, because you need a wheel within a wheel within a wheel in order to stabilize the structure. You need to get all the vectors stabilized so that then it's impervious to gravity. It doesn't affect it. And that's what the bubble is in a ball lightning. It produces this non-radiating boundary when you have a minimum of a wheel within a wheel within a wheel structure. The electromagnetic waves cancel at a boundary because it's the electron interaction in the toroidal moment that interacts with the dark matter, which is the random neutrinos, which is an anapole moment. It basically excludes that piece of space-time from the ordinary rules outside it. What you're looking at there, can you see my mouse pointer? Yeah.
I certainly can.
This is Metin R's work on bubble structures in acoustic cavitation. Okay, this is this middle one here. You can see there's a point here in which this ring element comes into and stops. And then there's a little bit going through and comes into this ring element and stops here. Okay. Then there's this material coming in from the outside and this material coming in from the outside. This is pulling in matter from the open environment, and then it's forcing it into a closed loop. And this is just standing wave sound. Now, the same process is going on here And this is on the copper oxide of the late Neil Crichton Gold's cold fusion experiment. You have the two spots in the middle. When you do the actual structure, these two spots in this ring, and you line it up, it actually comes out with the beams. These beams are extending out beyond the non-radiating boundary here because you don't get it closing into the substructure. Okay, and I'll show you how that works. And so you have these beams and they eject out. This is a disruption beam, this is a disruption beam, but there's another disruption beam that's going through the center. Okay, and that's producing this hole. That's producing these two spots here. Okay. And this is in a plasma reactor of Henk Uren in Holland. Again, this is a two-order structure, and it produces a Paisley. So all of the symbols of the old religions and everything, they're all related to this. So you always get a Paisley with a 2 or 3 order structure. You don't get it with a 4 order structure, because the fourth order structure is where the first order structure where the power of God comes under control, according to Sumerians. Okay. Here, this is a Paisley in a water spout in 1969, taken by your weather service just off the coast of Florida. And this is water which is being lifted by anti-gravity, and it's being lifted and it's being vaporized because the water is being over-energized by chi, that is relative neutrino condensate clusters, that are causing the weak hydrogen bonds to move the water from being water to water gas without it boiling. Okay, and this is the whole process is able to do all these amazing things because it overexcites the matter.
Why do they appear at sea like that? Why do you end up with that phenomena just?
Well, because water is polar. Water moving around as a polar object produces a charged ring. It carries static electricity. If you've ever looked at those experiments where is it Faraday or so, I don't know, he drops water and it takes charge. And they've done a recent thing on YouTube where they found that if they charge a water droplet up and it hits a piece of glass, then it will not splash. But if it's not charged, it will splash. So water is absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So critical. And what you're seeing here is down the bottom, you've got two flares, and the flares are showing the direction of the air currents, and you've got waves on the sea. But here, this black water is because it's extremely fast. And the weird thing is you have these waves immediately, and then you have an event horizon here, right? Where this is moving this way, but these are still moving that way.
Weird.
And that's because you have a chi flux in here, which makes it superfluid. And so there's literally an event horizon. And what you're seeing here is the vortex going through on the next fractal up in the ether. And there will be a counter. You have a cyclone and an anticyclone. The anticyclone will be pointing up into the sky. You don't see that bit. You only see the bit that comes down. So this is the process going on a macro level you can see with a plane, right? And it's all scale invariant. Now, if I go to the next slide here, it's going to give me the next slide. Is that the next slide? Yeah, okay. So here we can see in our experiment here, if it's going to play, yeah. You can see that a ball forms on the end of this copper tube. The copper tube goes into the steel tube, which goes to the outside of the reactor. This is, if we change the camera specifics, we can look through the non-radiating boundary of the sphere, and we can see to the torus inside, which is this. And it has a cone, which is the vortex coming out of the bottom of the torus. Okay, and that sends a tornado through this copper pipe and through the copper pipe here, and then it's touching down here on the outside of the reactor. And what it's doing is it's energizing the metal and turning it orange. Now, I don't think there's a big temperature change there. I think that it might be being excited, but that is because of the flux of chi that's being pulled through by the vortex that's going in here.
Are plasmoids being shot from? Is that a plasmoid gun?
That's a plasmoid being formed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a stable structure. But
does it continue on? Is it a coherent structure outside of that little?
When that flashes on this thing, it launches itself towards the anode, and the anode is cased in a fused quartz sheath, and we see the impact marks, and we have 3 order structures, 4 order structures, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to like 30 or something, and subdivisions. So it depends how long it spends here before it reorganizes into different structures. But we literally have triangular impact structures or squares with lines coming off them. Literally, it produces a swastika. It goes boom, and there's a swastika there.
Why would it produce it? Is that a coincidence? Is that just a way
no,
of describing
it's not a coincidence, and you're going to see why. Basically, the swastika is, and the salvastika, so the swastika is breaking matter up and it's a projection of energy. So, for instance, at the governmental building down the road here in Brno, for this region of the Czech Republic, which was built in the early 1900s, right? It was 1903 or something that it was built, okay? All the way around the building, it has swastikas.
Yeah.
Because it's projecting the power out, right? In the building in Croatia, where Nikola Tesla first met the electrician that inspired him to do electricity, I went and visited this the year before last. As you go into that school, around the doorway, it has salvasticas. This is the nurturing force, the mother force, the female force. But it's bringing you in, and it's giving you stuff to condense into your brain. You're giving information. So the salvastika, and they come, the yin and the yang being the swastika, the salvastika being the yin, they symbolize, and one's one rotation and one's the other rotation. And the crazy thing about the Nazi flag is if you look at one side, it's the swastika, and you look at the other side, it's the salvastika.
Why? Because they turn the different direction?
Well, because you're looking at it through the other side, aren't you?
Yeah.
If you put it on and you staple it in as fabric, it's going one way when you look at it that way. But if you look at the other side of the flag, it's the other way. It's got the swastika and salvastika. Right. You actually have to put two pieces of fabric, one on either side, differently to make it something different.
Well, what is the intellectual DNA of this math, though? If the Nazis were using it, they probably didn't fully understand where it came from. It was just a symbol that had other meanings within cultures. I don't know why.
No. That's where they had this Rasputin guy that worked for Hitler in the top of the SS, and he was into all the esoteric and hidden technology, the occult technology, and he was driving this technology.
Okay, so they didn't not everyone that uses those symbols, and it's reflected in all sorts of other ways in art, not just the swastika. In
they're auspicious symbols. So when I was living in India, every single truck I was driving behind on my e-bike on the way to my work for 8.5 years, they had these swastika and salvastika on them. Right, they're in every temple. You see salvastikas marking all of the temples in Japan. Swastika and salvastika is the fabric of all Hindu temples. If you walk into the temple, the walls are covered with them.
When do you think if that's knowledge being reflected of advanced physical understandings that we're just now realizing, when was it used last, do you believe?
When was it used?
Yeah, in other words, these motifs are carried out through thousands of years and have always existed. But at some point, they presumably the culture who used that motif forgot of the importance of it, or did everybody that had those ancient geometries within their art and architecture, did they understand that it was a power generator?
I think what you'll find is that all over the world, these structures were seen in the post-cataclysm major sites.
That's what I was about to get to. That was well, not about to get to, but what I was hinting at. Was it the technology only available before the cataclysm, or did
this technology is eternal? It's the way the universe works. You only have to pay attention for a small amount of your life to realize that this is how the universe works. This is just how it does. It's written in our faces.
Yeah, explain that.
We are designed after the technology that runs the universe,
as is the Tesla symbol.
Absolutely, I now have it here around my neck, taken from this is a souvenir from the Finland Museum, and in that Finland Museum, I showed in my first Cosmic Summit presentation year before last that the Tesla logo is a complete and 100% ripoff with all aspects of the original 1600-year-old symbols of the Ukonopsara, the Finnish Thor's hammer, and as you see here. This swastika and salvastika symbolizes lightning bolts, ball lightning, because a lightning bolt is ball lightning. The bolt itself is ball lightning. There's always a ball lightning that leads the discharge channel for the lightning to go through, representing the thunder god and the king of the gods, such as Indra in Vedic Hinduism, Zeus in the ancient Greek religion, Jupiter in the ancient Roman religion, and Thor in the ancient Germanic religion. Right, that's straight off Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is from Coptic Christians in Old Mongolia, the capital. This is in Sudan, just up the Nile from Egypt. And you see the symbology here. You've got the Christian cross with the vortex and anti-vortex. You have the Maltese cross or the Sumerian symbol of God-controlled power here, which is on the clothing of the Pope, right? And over here, you have a more accurate version where it has the additional circles showing the spheres that are produced in the subtors. Okay, this shows that thousands of years ago they knew this well enough to show various representations of how you can show this technology.
Do you believe they used it?
I believe that this is key to all of the production technologies that are confusing people. It's only a matter of time, if someone doesn't get there first, that I will show how to do it.
How to do what?
Carve rock, which doesn't look like you can carve it. Sculpt rock, turn rock to jelly. Because we've had experiments where the exotic vacuum object will travel straight through fused quartz or alumina. And fused quartz melts at just over 1700 degrees, alumina 2073 degrees or something, right? But what Ken Shoulders showed is that you can go through alumina and it leaves a fully vitrified channel, nice smooth coating on it. And then it comes up under beeswax, which melts at less than 60 degrees C, and puts alumina out in a thin layer. So it's not hotter than beeswax. This can disintegrate refractory ceramics. That's where your glass disappears in your experiment in the 1970s when they were trying to do ormus, degrade ormus. Okay. So here is the two-order structure, which is the wheel making 2 wheels of those make that wheel, and then 2 wheels at this level make that wheel. Okay, that's a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. Okay,
and some people may be familiar from their Bible study.
Yeah, this is what it is. And the eyes, so the structure here, the 4-order Tor structure here is a 4-4 with a N level 1 structure.
This is not referenced in Ezekiel. The wheel within a wheel within a wheel.
It's in the book of Revelations. We've been in Revelations for quite some time. That's just the reality, and people need to deal with that. So essentially,
drop the mic.
I said that on the 1st of March 2017, very, very clearly and absolutely equivocally.
We are in Revelations that these things are proceeding.
Yes, they're proceeding. Yeah. I don't know what the time scale is, but like after we get through the trials and tribulations, which I think we've done a few of them, because they've been trying to do scorched earth policy. They've done war and pestilence, right? They've really gone to town on those, and they failed in both cases because humans are resilient. And when the technology is revealed, we'll have 1,000 years of glory time. We're in the next epoch. That's what I mean, very literally, by the new dawn of an old age.
What a great phrase. I should have led with it, because it was the Cosmic Summit's tagline 2 years ago. Because
it was the title of my presentation before that, when I was talking about how this defines how the Great Pyramid is structured and why.
Yeah.
So here, this
prologue.
Yeah. So what happens here is what they were trying to do in the Nazi belt is they were trying to spin matter around. Well, this spins matter around relativistically. Moreover, as you keep feeding this energy, it goes into the phase singularity, both at this core and in the subcores and in the sub-subcores, and they stabilize the whole structure so that it doesn't fall apart. So you can keep feeding it energy, so it keeps accelerating, and you have a topological monopole here, okay? And the topological monopole in the center, this is the Christ center, right? The still, quiet, calm, where all the forces are unified. The mass goes up and up and up, and you just don't stop it. And when it gets to a certain mass density at a point, it goes through what's called the Schwinger limit. And the Schwinger limit then provides a permanent gradient in the ether. It cannot stabilize, because as soon as the ether tries to stabilize the matter, it then sucks it all in faster than it can stabilize. And this is when you can go faster than light. So this, when David Adair produced this thing with a Nazi scientist there when he was 17 years old in White Sands, and he spun it up and it disappeared in something like Mach 37 or whatever. It disappeared and they can only see it on radar. This is what was going on. It was getting to the point of self-sustaining on the point where there was always a gradient in the ether. And so you just accelerate, and as fast as you accelerate, you keep accelerating. And it's instantaneous, because you produce a non-radiating boundary, and there's no inertia, because it can't go in. The thing that causes inertia can't go in. So this is the God's control power, and every single aspect of it, at every fractal level, is golden ratio. So you have a golden ratio vortex. This is the Sothic triangle, always associated with the Ankh. The loop of the Ankh is the toroidal moment. The tail of the Ankh is the flux in, and the Ankh goes from here to here. Okay, the top, between the top of the apple, and the apple is gravity. It's a symbol of gravity by Newton, but not for any other reason than it literally is, showing how this universe works. The top of the Ankh, the top of the apple to the center of the apple, and then from the center of the apple to the point of destruction down here. And the point of destruction is where the torsion field interacts with the Tor at the fractal level above this whole structure.
Okay.
And so, and it's very precisely the golden ratio. And there's golden ratios and everything here. So this explains why our fingers are the ratios they are, why the face is the ratios they are. Is why it's all across nature, because this is the root level access to how nature works. So when you get the topological monopole, you basically you can convert matter. So Matsumoto says it produces a mini bang. It resets the universe. The matter that goes in there becomes completely denatured. And then when the confinement field collapses, the matter spews out as newly synthesized elements. And what it is it's pure energy coming out, and it hits our vacuum energy density, and it gets immediately compressed into a range of elements. And it's dependent on the density of material in there, the elements you get. So it's like, how much do you put in there and how much do you bake it? And this is all basically stated in Controlled Nuclear Synthesis by S.V. Adamenko in his 2006-7 book, having done 20,000 experiments sequentially in a row and produced every element in the periodic table from each of the metal elements in the periodic table. 20,000 experiments sequentially, all produced all of the elements in the periodic table. And in his 2003 patent, he shows an iron-rich crenellated sphere, which is split in two. That's the image he chooses from SEM, with a hollow space inside. And in the hollow space, in 2005 article in Kiev in Ukraine, in a newspaper article, he says the nuclear transmutations occur inside this hollow space with dark matter. And the dark matter is relic neutrinos. He doesn't say that, but that is the key dark matter, because it allows the weak interaction. Okay. And so you are able to transmute matter. You are able to produce a fantastic amount of energy, and it's like a cold effect. You do not see an explosion, but it disintegrates matter, and it pulls its energy in by manipulating magnetic fields, because it produces this massive topological monopole. That explains your magnetometers. Okay, when you have a change in the flux of relic neutrinos, you change beta decay. This was shown by, it was predicted by Yakov Zeldovich. Yakov Zeldovich was the principal in the Soviet nuclear weapons program, and he predicted that beta isotopes could be a method for detecting relic neutrino flows. And this was proven by Alexander Parkhomov, who I translated his book, his 2009 book. I translated it in 2019. And so it's the relic neutrino flows. When you manipulate those, they are the thing that gets sucked in to do the work, and they are the thing that is gravity, and they are the thing that causes magnetism. And because it is beta isotopes that they change, that's why the radionuclide clocks all over the world changed, because it changed the local gravitational and magnetic flux density around the world. Those two signatures, the magnetometers and the nuclear isotope, beta isotope based nuclear clocks changing are perfect signatures of this process in action. You don't even have to look at what happened on ground zero. Those two things cannot be explained by planes and jet fuel. They can't be. The government theory cannot explain those observations, which are real and seen. Okay? So immediately the government theory needs some extra theory to explain those things.
Right. I remember in Robert Temple's book, New Science of Heaven, which I highly recommend, he goes through the history of the suppression of ball lightning research.
Yeah, well, I've added a few more layers to that.
Well, right. Okay. I was going to say, I know you're familiar with all of this stuff, but I just thought it was surprising because it's a natural phenomenon. And it seemed like anybody that studied it, they'd have a conference or whatnot, and then it would all kind of disappear and go dark. Is that a good way to put it?
Not entirely, because what happened in 2000, the Dennis Abrahamson model of ball lightning came out, and this was where an arc discharge goes into the air, it vaporizes some silicon and carbon, it goes up into a toroidal vortex, and that burns in the air, producing the light. But of course, this is nonsense, because ball lightning can often form directly in the air. So how's that happening? In fact, the only spectrum of ball lightning captured, and it's on Wikipedia, and it was in Nature, I think. You can go and see it. It has iron, calcium, and silicon in there, other than the elements that are already in the air. And it formed in the air. They were looking at lightning, and one formed, right? And so they got that spectrum. Okay. Now, when the Abrahamson and Dennis model came out, these are two Israelis that came up with this model in 2000. The BBC ran this article, and the BBC, they went to, of all the people on planet Earth, they went to Dr. Graham Hubler. Dr. Graham Hubler. Who is Dr. Graham Hubler? He was the lead scientist at the Condensed Matter Nuclear Science Lab, or another major lab in the US Naval Laboratories. Okay, of all the people on planet Earth, the BBC go to him for his opinion. And he says, well, the US Navy has been very interested in ball lightning for a long time. This does explain some of the phenomena, but not everything. But it's one to keep an eye on, something along those lines, right? This is from 2000, 2001, early 2001, late 2000, sometime around there. You'll have to look when the Abrahamson and Dennis model came out. Of course, that didn't stop there, because in October 2001, this is like the following month after 9/11, the US Air Force commissioned Eric W. Davis, a colleague of Hal Puthoff, the guy that found Ken Shoulders, to look at John Hutchison, right? Ken Shoulders,
well known in UFO circles as the man in the know.
Yeah, right, okay. So Eric W. Davis writes the ball lightning study, which was released on the Black Vault. I've done videos on it in the past, and in there he talks about ways forward, and he gives two ways forward that are the most reliable and practical ways. He says Ken Shoulders exotic vacuum objects research and United States Air Force research done in the 1950s to 1960s, but that is the only part of the document that's fully classified. Right? Wait. And when it has the classification terms under there, you know what it's classified under? Space and aerospace.
Oh, really? And it was ball lightning research.
It was ball lightning research. The most practical way to explore the effects and how to manipulate ball lightning was done in the 1950s and 60s under space, and it was classified in that. I think it reported in 2002, the year after 9/11, and it was under space and aerospace. Now, why would someone commission that report at that specific time, shortly after 9/11? And then you have to look at the Russian statue, the Russian sculpture that was given to America to commemorate the loss of life at 9/11. It's over in New Jersey, and if you look at it across the water, and do you know what it is? It's a fractured piece of steel with a drop of aluminium in the middle, symbolizing.
Is that the Russians going wink, wink? We know how you did this?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Jesus.
Because apparently, according to Tom Beard in the 1970s, it was Khrushchev and the then US president or something, they made an agreement not to develop this technology, which is far, far, far more serious than nuclear weapons.
Okay, that gets to our friend Ashton Forbes. Now, if we hadn't set off every disinformation bell in the system by these terms, regardless of whether it's well communicated, it will be noted. Did you and Ashton get a chance to talk at the Cosmic Summit? And seems like there's a certain amount of cross fertilization of your ideas, or not fertilization, but there's some overlap.
The difference with myself is I've literally seen 3 plasma balls being produced in our reactor and self-organizing and rotating around their common center of mass.
Okay, which
again, I got it on video.
For those who don't know,
Ashton
Forbes is the proponent of the idea that the supposedly CGI video from 2015 of the MH70 plane.
So before I ever spoke to Ashton,
disappearing. Just so the plane that disappeared, Ashton believes.
So MH370.
370, yeah.
Yeah, 370. MH17 was the plane that apparently disappeared over Ukraine, and apparently was.
Well, it did disappear.
Well, the one in Ukraine didn't disappear; it fell to the ground.
But some people actually said they took the plane to Ukraine. But the Malaysian airliner,
so
that disappeared, disappeared.
So what happened was, before I ever knew Ashton Forbes, my former co-director of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, Matthew Velat, sent me those 2 videos and said, "I think you know what these are." And so I did a video on it immediately, and I explained, and I do not need to change a single thing I said in that video. It's as valid today as it was. And then a couple of weeks later, I spoke to Ashton Forbes about it. Ashton Forbes was already talking about it, but I came in and look in the videos. And my take on the videos is it doesn't matter whether this was faked, because I could probably fake that. I actually modeled a plane quite similar in the early 2000s. And I've done kind of like false color images in part of my CG work and stuff. I'm not going to bother doing it, because my view on it is it doesn't matter whether it's real or it's faked. Whoever did that was either knowingly producing a video of the effect, it is a real video, or they were remote viewing, because creatives are the best remote viewers. It doesn't, my take on it doesn't actually matter the provenance. What matters is what is shown, and what is shown is an effect that we have seen in the laboratory. We have seen matter disappearing. We have seen 3 plasmoids coming together and self-organizing into and orbiting around themselves, a common center of mass. We got that on video, and I published that in 2021, I think.
Bob, is the mature technology that we assume that the government, for lack of a better word, has, is it being kept from us for safety reasons or pecuniary reasons? Are they making money, keeping us safe, or both?
I think all of the above. All of the above.
Okay.
So here's the thing. John Archibald Wheeler, and I shared this video at my first Cosmic Summit presentation a couple of years back. And I shared it actually at ICCF 25 before Ashton even started looking at those videos, right? And I said this was practical applications of the fractal toroidal moment. That was my presentation in Szczecin in Poland in ICCF 25 years ago. And I showed a video which I shared also at the first Cosmic Summit that I gave a presentation.
That's the International Conference on Cold Fusion, folks.
Yeah, in Szczecin in Poland. And I did a video before that because they gave me 20 minutes to impart 12 years or 13 years of research. So that wasn't going to be enough. So I did another video at the same time publicly to share in more detail what I was trying to get across. But that particular video is John Archibald Wheeler, who invented the term black hole and wormhole, by the way. He was a principal on the Manhattan Project. He would have been working on the directly or on this periphery of those programs that are classified, that are in the ball lightning study. Okay, he's clearly talking about magnetohydrodynamics and a lot of works he does, and plasmoids. But in this thing, he talks about how if you've got light going around in a ring, this is his 1954 Gion paper, where he believes that all subatomic particles all the way through galaxies are basically on this framework. This is in 1954. He's saying that this is light going around a ring, and it's held together by a gravitational azimuth, which is the gravitational attraction of the light to itself. Then in this 1990s video recording, which I shared, he's saying that in modern times, he now believes that you just need to link up gravitational waves, and they will then pull together automatically, increase the gravitational wave, and this will lead to either an explosion or gravitational something that we would call today a black hole. Okay, that's literally what he says. Now, I only need to explain those videos when I was sent to them by Matthew Villatte before I ever spoke or knew of Ashton. I only needed 4 slides from my ICCF 25 presentation to explain them. That's it. I just needed 4 slides. I didn't even need to change them. I just needed to talk to those slides, right? And one of them was this work by John Archibald Wheeler. Now, what have I told you in this presentation? I've said that the yin and the yang, which you have always, you need a minimum fractal 2. And so you have a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. And other than the big wheel, you have 2 wheels in the subtor. And in the sub-subtors, you have 4 wheels, but they make 2 tors, subtors of 2 tors, right? So you have 1, 2, 4, okay? Making a wheel within wheel within wheel structure. Those will have gravity and anti-gravity waves. Now, the overall structure will have a gravity wave coming through the center. Now, when you've got one orb, which is the non-radiating boundary is the spherical part of it, that will have a gravity wave that goes in front. And I've talked about this for years, how it creates a spin wave in the relic neutrinos, and it only similar things, and I've got videos of these things going around each other, right? But they don't do anything. They're not responding to the magnetic fields, electric fields, but then when they come near the gravitational spin field, they will orbit around each other. So I've already had this on video, and I've presented this at conferences. So it was immediately obvious what was going on. But when I saw John Archibald Wheeler, he's saying that if you get these structures and then you orient them so the gravity wave goes into the next one, the gravity wave pulls itself in together, and then the next fractal level up is born, and that produces a new stronger gravity field. And that pulls those in, which pulling in makes that stronger, and that stronger pulls these in.
Bob, please don't make one of those in your laboratory.
We make those all the time, and I believe they go on in our brain.
Can't they be runaway? I mean, Ashton says, no, for lack of a better description, that somebody could make the world disappear.
I think, okay, so I have a book which is currently, unfortunately, sorry, Stoyan, supporting this monitor that I'm looking at. Yeah. But it's signed by Stoyan Sarg, who visited me and stayed with me in 2014. A couple of years later, he showed that 2 nuclear bombs detonated of modern size on north and southern hemisphere. This is why you should never give nuclear weapons to Australia. You should never have submarines with nuclear weapons. And I hope that Argentina Argentina or Brazil or whatever, they never use their nuclear weapons, because if you have a nuclear weapon above and below the equator, one will produce a vortex, the other one will produce an anti-vortex, and it will produce a self-organized structure. And I didn't understand it back in 2015. He said this will strip the atmosphere of the Earth, and the oceans will boil off in 4 hours.
Jesus. I mean, don't they have to be kind of nearby? I mean, if you set one off in the North Sea and another
one reinforces the other, and it starts pulling the ether in. It becomes a self-feeding structure.
Well, what the hell's going to happen to us, Bob, if this stuff gets out in the true
Well, no, we can already do this. By the way, listen to what I've just said. We can literally end life on Earth within 4 hours, and it will never come back. It'll strip the Earth of the water.
But someone has withheld from doing that, presumably because they have relatives and children and stuff. Okay, so they're holding this stuff back because it is dangerous to them and others.
They're holding it back because you can make a nuclear missile disappear in flight.
Right, and
you can't. And I said this to Ashton a long time ago. But basically, you want to keep people in a state of fear. And then you can tax them. We need to protect you. We need this huge military complex to protect you, because the bad guys over there, they got bombs. They could fire those bombs. If they told you that, firstly, if they told you that we could make all those bombs disappear before they ever touch the ground, no one's going to pay any taxes, are they? Like, why am I doing this for? Right?
It also helps explain to me, well, I thought one of the few explanations for why we would be so cavalier in the Ukraine war and just take us to what, provoke the hell out of Putin.
What Putin did is he
doesn't shoot them at us, is we can make them go poof. At least that would help explain.
He launched 19 Kinzhals in one salvo. A Kinzhal can be launched from sea, ship, land, or air, right?
Mhm.
Kinzhal is unstoppable with anything that the Americans have admitted to.
Is that a hypersonic weapon? What's a
A hypersonic weapon, yes.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can stop it, okay? And what they did by launching 19 Kinzhals is they said, we can knock out every single carrier you have on Earth immediately, and just nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And America didn't bat an eyelid. They
Right.
did not bat an eyelid. The other thing that's very weird about this story is after we had replicated on the 12th of the 12th, we started an experiment on 12 seconds past 12 minutes past 12 on the 12th of the 12th of the 12th, California time.
Yeah, I
and
remember that.
I was presenting this on the 14th of December in a military base in Rome. I then went to the UK and I was invited to go and meet this person who wanted to speak to me. And so I booked a hotel and I went and met him, and he started talking about hypersonic scramjets.
Yeah.
How do you get, and he wanted to know what I knew about them. And I'm thinking, how do you get from me doing cold fusion and replicating this technology to asking whether you can develop scramjets? What's the connection? Now I know the connection.
It's just incredible. I've got to wrap up in a minute, and I've never said that in a podcast because I usually just open end them, but I need to have dinner with an old friend.
Yeah, no,
Tell me this: are there some concepts that you want to share at the end, like right now, that you just kind of fill in some cracks? I know you could go for another 2 or 3 hours, but what do people kind of need to know? Maybe big picture. What's coming? Are you going
to? Firstly, I want to just clarify, and again, it's the first time on this that I've said this. I want to make clear that the accelerated mass that the Nazi Bell were trying to do and so on, that has a limit. Electrodynamically, you think you can get there by just moving the fields. And that might get there. That might get there. But because what it's doing is, in those instances, it will be cohering the relic neutrinos into a point, and you only need to get an amount of thing above the Schwinger limit. It doesn't matter how small it is. It just needs to be a mass density above the Schwinger limit, and then that will create a permanent gradient in the ether, right? And that gives you anti-gravity. Now, you don't want to be in the flux of that. You'll end up what that guy, Jake Barber, did. He feels like he's connected to God because he's getting a load of chi going through him. But of course, it makes all his skin fall off because it's turning the water to water gas under his flesh. And so his skin falls off, right? So like these are completely, and this is what was happening in my view with the people, jet fuel does not make people take their clothes off because they think something's going on and jump out of a building to get away from something, right? But something that was making their skin feel like it's boiling under there, and they would want to get away from that. I think those people jumped because they were being exposed to what Jake Barber was being exposed to. They might have felt they could fly because they felt they were connected to God, right? Because they were in such a chi flux, right? So this is anti-gravity, but the way you get around this is you create a triangular craft and you have the orbs on the corners.
Ultimately, is this technology good news for us or bad news?
One, we have used this technology before as humans. All species in any part of the galaxy and the universe will ultimately learn about this technology. This is the great power. The original Greek translation is praeus, not meek. Praeus, when properly translated, means that those that know that they have great power but choose not to use it will inherit the earth. You cannot use this for weapons because we can destroy the planet. But as I've already discussed, we already have the means to destroy the planet many, many, many times over. Not just the bomb detonation. I mean, using 2 bombs strategically to strip the atmosphere within about 4 hours.
But they're hard to make. Would this be hard to, is it a...
Nature makes it very trivially. A 3-year-old can run a cavitation experiment using a $35 piece of equipment, and they're producing anti-gravity waves and gravity waves, and they're producing lighter elements in the yang force as it dissembles matter, and the heavier elements in the yin force as they condense matter. This can be done by a 3-year-old, and they need the incredible skills of being able to pour water from a jug. They need to be able to fold aluminium kitchen foil, and they need to be able to press a button. There are many, many people on Earth that can replicate this experiment, okay? And it has been widely replicated, okay? So showing the principles is really rather trivial, and it's just wanting to know. It's as I've said since 2000 well, I suggested it in 2019, but in 2021 I said, you can do it, and it takes minutes, and it's inexpensive.
Okay, but do you need greater resources, obviously, and I hope unattainable resources, except maybe by nation states, to make the world disappear?
Yeah, but where you infect metal with this, it typically likes to keep working for a minimum of 2 days. It typically works up to 2 days, but the active structures can stay in the metal and be re-excited. And the Russians have been able to, Neil Crichton Gold re-excited them after 9 months by just raising the temperature to around about 1,000 degrees. Okay. And the Russians were able to re-excite theirs by putting outside in sunlight for 10 days. And so if it's exposed to, see the sun, photons will carry a flux of the relic neutrinos with them. And if you've got one of these structures built up and it's in a dormant state, you can re-energize it. I mean, magic is freaking real, but it's not magic, it's just science. The sword in the stone, where you have this myth of one type of metal inside another metal. It was actually a metal anvil. It wasn't in a stone. That was on a stone down in Tintagel. And the idea is you had to pull it out. And this is where the connection to, this is where it gets a little bit weird. If it hasn't been weird already,
please. Yeah.
You need to be of the right genetic makeup. If the nascent clusters that were put in, because Ninel Kaligina could produce these things and they could come out of her fingers, and she could stop and start the heart of a frog. She stopped the heart of a man that was there. She could manipulate things behind shields, static shields and stuff. And because it's coming out of the fingers, they're quantum entangled to your consciousness, right? So if the person putting the sword in with this highly energized sword was able to put it in, it would be someone of that bloodline that was literally able to pull it out, because they would be the only one that could intend to have that thing pulled out, right? It gets a little bit weird, but this is the whole thing behind spoon bending. When Uri Geller is putting the material into the spoon, and when in 1983 the CIA analyzed those, and you can go and look at my blog at remoteview.acu or remoteview.substack.com. I rebuilt that CIA 1983 document. They found that when they looked at the crystal grain boundaries in these bent metal that have been done with this telekinesis process, that something had happened on the crystal grain boundaries and it slipped. This is exactly what Matsumoto found in his cold fusion experiments. The process starts on the crystal grain boundaries and it starts to cause it to lose its integrity. This is essentially the process. So it's not magic, it's just science. And it's when you have a company called Science Applications International Corporation, it's creating magic, but just through the application of science. It's a very good name for a military contractor. It's an extremely good name. It's exactly what it is.
Fantastic. I got an Uber picking me up in 12 minutes. I can't say anything, or I would sit here for another 45. Hey, folks, y'all can find Bob's experiments, not just him talking, because Bob doesn't talk about things that he doesn't do and see himself. So he does it and shows it to you at the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project YouTube channel. And then he has a fantastic Substack, which is Remote View. And you can see him here. Please like, share, and follow him. But while you're out there liking, sharing, and following, please go to all the major platforms and make sure to like, share, follow, comment, maybe give a review on YouTube of this podcast at Cosmic Summit. And Bob, we will see you at the next Cosmic Summit. You can come and meet him, talk to him, and he likes to work the crowd, and the crowd sure works him. He had a lot of big fans the last 2 years. It's special for a lot of people to meet Bob in person. But Bob, thank you so much, man. I look forward to being a lifelong friend of yours. And
it's great. And thank you for the work bringing all these different eclectic people. I had some incredible conversations with people I never imagined I would have an opportunity to meet. And that's what you've done. And so thank you very much for doing that. Yeah, go to the Cosmic Summit website. Why don't you get a pass to look at their previous video collection from previous Cosmic Summits? They've got them all there for you to stream as you wish. And they do put some stuff out on the Cosmic Summit YouTube channel, right? So you have some stuff to watch for free.
Well, actually, Bob, I was going to close with that. What we'll do is we're putting out one full presentation from this year once a week for a year, because we actually have that much content. We've easily got 50 hours. And what we'll do, and we do it every Friday, and we also put this podcast out every Friday. So what we'll do is put out not your classroom presentation, because you have over 3 hours of content from this year, but your stage presentation.
Awesome.
Right. Okay. We'll put it out this Friday. It'll accompany this podcast. So if you want to hear another hour or so of Bob, it is available elsewhere on this very channel. Thank you, Bob Greenyer.
Thank you, George.